December 18, 1944. 7:43 a.m. 31 degrees Fahrenheit. Private First Class James McNulty crouched behind a shattered stone wall in the Belgian village of Krinkelt, his breath forming white clouds in the freezing air. Around him, the remains of K Company, 393rd Infantry Regiment, numbered just 47 men. They had started the morning with 112. The German positions stretched across the ridge, 8 fortified machine gun nests spaced roughly 70 yards apart. McNulty could see them clearly through the bare winter trees, concrete pillboxes reinforced with railroad ties, each commanding overlapping fields of fire across the snowy slope. Intelligence estimated 20 to 25 enemy soldiers per position. The math was simple and brutal. His company was outnumbered 4-1, pinned down, running low on ammunition, and the temperature was dropping. Captain Robert Thompson, 26 years old and looking 50, crawled along the frozen ground to McNulty's position. His face was gray beneath 3 days of stubble. "We can't hold this position," Thompson said, his voice barely audible over the wind. "Artillery support is 30 minutes out. Maybe longer. We try to advance, they cut us apart. We stay here, they flank us before noon." McNulty didn't respond immediately. He was staring at the 8 positions, doing calculations in his head. Calculations that had nothing to do with military doctrine. The expert consensus was clear. Every tactical manual, every training scenario, every experienced officer who had studied the situation would reach the same conclusion. Without heavy weapons, without air support, without numerical superiority, an assault on fortified positions was suicide. The casualty projections were catastrophic. Best case scenario, 60% losses before reaching the first pillbox. More likely, complete annihilation. But McNulty wasn't thinking about doctrine. He was thinking about flour. If you want to know how a 23-year-old cook turned 8 German fortifications into burning coffins using nothing but household ingredients, hit that subscribe button. Because what happened next shouldn't have worked. According to every military expert in 1944, it was impossible. But they hadn't grown up in McNulty's kitchen. James Patrick McNulty was nobody's idea of a soldier. Born March 15, 1921, in Butte, Montana, he was the second son of an Irish immigrant copper miner and a German-American baker. While other boys played war with wooden rifles, McNulty spent his afternoons in his mother's commercial bakery, learning the chemistry of combustion long before he knew that's what it was called. His mother, Anna, ran one of the largest commercial bakeries in Butte. 4 industrial ovens, each capable of reaching 800 degrees. She taught her son the dangerous dance of flour and heat. How a 5-pound bag of flour, split open and dispersed in the air, could turn an oven chamber into an explosion waiting for a spark. How grain dust, suspended in oxygen, became more volatile than gasoline fumes. "Flour is a fuel," she would tell him, her German accent thick even after 20 years in Montana. "Respect it, control it, or it controls you." In 1937, McNulty witnessed a dust explosion that destroyed a grain elevator in Great Falls, killing 11 workers. He was 16. He remembered the initial flash, then the secondary explosions as suspended particles found oxygen. The building didn't just burn, it detonated from the inside out. When McNulty was drafted in October 1943, his slight frame and bad eyesight kept him out of combat units. The Army made him a cook. Private First Class James McNulty, Mobile Kitchen Unit, 393rd Infantry Regiment. His job was to feed soldiers, not kill Germans. But by December 1944, the problem facing American forces in Belgium wasn't hunger. It was German pillboxes. The statistics were grim. Since D-Day, American forces had faced over 3,000 fortified German positions across Western Europe. Standard procedure, artillery bombardment followed by infantry assault, required an average of 48 rounds of heavy artillery per pillbox. Even then, casualty rates exceeded 35%. Many positions had to be bypassed entirely, leaving them operational and dangerous behind Allied lines. Flamethrowers worked, but their effective range was barely 30 yards. Getting that close usually meant running through machine gun fire. The M2 flamethrower weighed 68 pounds fully loaded and made its operator the highest priority target on any battlefield. Average life expectancy of a flamethrower operator in combat was measured in minutes. Satchel charges were effective but required soldiers to reach the pillbox entrance. Again, a suicidal proposition against interlocking fields of fire. Tank support worked when available, but in the dense Ardennes forest, armor was scarce and vulnerable. The Wehrmacht had learned from the mistakes of World War I. Their pillboxes weren't just concrete boxes, they were engineering marvels. Reinforced with steel, positioned for mutual support, designed with murder holes and escape tunnels. Each one could hold out for hours, sometimes days, even when surrounded. On December 17th, McNulty's kitchen unit had been overrun during the initial German offensive. He'd grabbed a rifle and fallen back with K Company, trading his ladle for an M1 Garand. Nobody asked if he knew how to use it. There wasn't time. But McNulty had taken something else from that kitchen: 3 50-pound sacks of bleached white flour. When Captain Thompson asked him why the hell a cook was hauling 150 pounds of baking ingredients through a combat zone, McNulty said he wasn't sure yet. He just knew it might be useful. The other soldiers thought he was insane. Sergeant William Hayes called him the Nutty Baker. Lieutenant Charles Morrison suggested McNulty had finally cracked under the stress. Even Thompson, desperate as he was, looked at those flour sacks with undisguised skepticism. "You planning to bake them a cake?" Hayes asked. McNulty just stared at the German positions and said, "Something like that." The stupid idea had germinated from practical experience, not military theory. McNulty understood something that every weapons engineer and tactical planner had somehow missed. Flour wasn't food. It was fuel. And every one of those German pillboxes was actually a perfectly designed combustion chamber. Here's what the experts didn't understand about fortified positions. A German pillbox was designed to be impenetrable from the outside. Concrete walls 18 to 24 inches thick. Steel reinforcement bars every 6 inches. Firing ports positioned to maximize outgoing fire while minimizing incoming danger. The entire structure was a defensive masterpiece. But defensive engineering requires one critical feature that every designer takes for granted: ventilation. A pillbox full of soldiers firing machine guns generates carbon monoxide, cordite smoke, and heat. Without air circulation, the men inside would suffocate within 30 minutes. So every German pillbox had ventilation ports, usually positioned on the roof or rear wall. Small openings, easily defended, carefully positioned, and completely vulnerable to what McNulty was planning. This is the part historians miss when they write about fortification tactics. They focus on armor penetration, explosive force, kinetic energy. They never talk about the air inside the box. McNulty's innovation was counterintuitive to the point of absurdity. Instead of trying to break through the armor, he planned to poison the air. But not with gas, with dust. The physics are straightforward. Flour particles, when finely dispersed in oxygen, create an explosive mixture. Each particle has a high surface area to mass ratio, meaning it can burn almost instantaneously when exposed to flame. When thousands of particles ignite simultaneously in an enclosed space, the resulting pressure wave is devastating. The Germans had built ovens. They just didn't know it. McNulty's plan was simple in concept, extraordinarily difficult in execution. Get flour inside the pillbox through the ventilation system. Let it disperse naturally through air currents and circulation. Introduce an ignition source. Then pray the resulting explosion didn't just kill everyone inside, but destroyed the structure itself. The first problem was delivery. A pillbox ventilation port was roughly 8 inches square, positioned 30 to 40 feet away across open ground swept by machine gun fire. Throwing a 50-pound sack of flour that distance with any accuracy was impossible. McNulty's solution came from the same place as his original idea: practical experience. His mother's bakery had received flour deliveries in burlap sacks. Wet burlap. When damp, the fabric becomes heavy, dense, and most importantly, aerodynamic. He spent 15 minutes that morning soaking strips of burlap in a half-frozen stream, then wrapping them around small canvas bags, each containing roughly 5 pounds of flour. The wet burlap added weight and stability. The result wasn't elegant, but it was throwable. The second problem was ignition. White phosphorus grenades would work, but they burned too hot, too fast. The explosion needed to happen after the flour had time to disperse, not immediately. Timing was everything. McNulty rigged a delay mechanism using standard-issue M15 smoke grenades. By carefully damaging the fuse, he could extend the delay from 5 seconds to roughly 45 seconds. Long enough for the flour to settle and disperse. Short enough that the Germans couldn't evacuate. When he explained the plan to Captain Thompson at 8:17 a.m., the officer stared at him for a full 30 seconds without speaking. "You want to blow up German pillboxes," Thompson finally said, "with flour." "Yes, sir. Baking flour. Bleached white all-purpose flour, sir. The finer the grain, the better the explosion." Thompson looked at the 8 German positions, then at his 47 remaining men, then at the burlap-wrapped flour packets McNulty had assembled. "Private, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." "Yes, sir. If it doesn't work, we've just wasted ammunition and alerted every German on that ridge to our position." "Yes, sir." Thompson studied McNulty's face for a long moment. The private's expression was calm, certain. Not the face of a man who'd cracked under pressure. The face of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. "Do it," Thompson said. "Start with the northernmost position. If it works, we move down the line. If it doesn't, we're falling back to the tree line and praying for artillery." McNulty nodded. He picked up the first flour bomb. It weighed roughly 8 pounds, 5 pounds of flour, 3 pounds of wet burlap and canvas. The modified smoke grenade was taped to the outside. His hands were steady. 8:34 a.m. Position 1. McNulty crawled forward through frozen mud and dead grass until he was 42 yards from the northernmost pillbox. He could hear German voices inside, muffled but distinct. Someone was laughing. The sound made his stomach tight. The ventilation port was visible on the rear wall, a dark square against concrete. Distance to target, 38 yards. Wind coming from the west at maybe 5 miles per hour. McNulty had thrown a lot of flour sacks in his life, but never one wrapped in wet burlap, never under machine gun fire, never with 47 lives depending on accuracy. He rose to his knees. The world narrowed to that 8-inch square of darkness. The throw was underhand, like tossing a sandbag. The wet burlap gave it weight, stability. The bomb arced through the frigid air, end over end, and disappeared into the ventilation port with a soft thump. McNulty dropped flat. Started counting. The modified fuse should give him 45 seconds. Enough time for the flour to... The explosion wasn't loud. It was a muffled thump, like someone dropping a heavy weight inside a concrete box. but the effects were immediate and catastrophic. White smoke jetted from every opening, the ventilation port, the firing slits, gaps around the door. Then flame. Bright orange flame shot 10 feet into the air from the roof vent, burning with the chemical fury of pure oxygen combustion. The pillbox shuddered, not from external force, but from internal pressure. The concrete itself seemed to bulge, stressed beyond its design parameters. Cracks spiderwebbed across the walls. Then silence. Complete, terrible silence. No screaming. No gunfire. Nothing. 47 American soldiers stared in shocked disbelief. Captain Thompson whispered something that might have been a prayer or a curse. McNulty was already preparing the second bomb. 8:41 a.m. Position 2. The Germans in the second pillbox had heard the explosion. They were alert now, scanning for threats. But they were looking for tanks, for artillery, for anything conventional. They weren't watching the rear ventilation port. McNulty's second throw was better than the first. The bomb went in clean, no hesitation. He counted to 45. At 43, Position 2 detonated. This time the explosion was louder. McNulty realized why. They'd been firing their machine gun when the flower ignited. The muzzle flash had provided the ignition source before the smoke grenade even activated. The timing was accidental but perfect. 8:47 a.m. Position 3. Now the Germans understood something was happening. Machine gun fire erupted from the remaining positions, sweeping the American lines. McNulty pressed himself into the frozen earth as bullets snapped overhead. One round struck a tree trunk 6 inches from his head, spraying bark and ice. He waited for the fire to slacken. 30 seconds. 45. The Germans were conserving ammunition, firing in disciplined bursts. McNulty rose, threw, hit the vent, dropped. Position 3 exploded at 8:49 a.m. This time the concrete actually cracked, a visible fracture running from the roof to the foundation. Fire poured from the opening like blood from a wound. 8:52 a.m. Position 4. The fourth pillbox was the most exposed, positioned on a slight rise with clear sight lines in all directions. McNulty would have to close to within 30 yards to have any chance of hitting the vent. Sergeant Hayes volunteered to provide covering fire. 10 men lined up along the stone wall, rifles ready. Thompson gave the signal. The Americans opened fire. It wasn't much, 10 rifles against a fortified position, but it was enough to make the Germans duck, to disrupt their aim for crucial seconds. McNulty ran. Actually ran, sprinting across open ground with the flower bomb clutched against his chest. He could hear bullets striking the snow around him, could feel the pressure waves as rounds passed close. 20 yards. 25. 30. He planted his feet. Threw. The bomb sailed high, too high, cleared the vent by 2 feet and bounced off the roof. McNulty's stomach dropped. He'd missed. He'd run 30 yards through enemy fire and the bomb rolled. Gravity and slope carried it back down the curved roof. It caught on the lip of the ventilation port, teetered, fell inside. McNulty didn't wait to see if it worked. He was already running back, diving behind the wall as German fire intensified. Hayes grabbed his jacket and pulled him down into cover. Position 4 exploded at 8:54 a.m. The force was strong enough to blow the steel door off its hinges. It tumbled through the air and embedded itself in a tree trunk 20 feet away. 8:58 a.m. Position 5. McNulty's hands were shaking now. Not from fear, from cold and adrenaline and the physical toll of throwing 8-pound bombs with precision while under fire. His shoulder ached. His fingers were numb. Position 5 was directly uphill, the most defensible of all the German fortifications. The ventilation port faced downslope, making it an easy throw but a nearly impossible approach. McNulty would be completely exposed. Captain Thompson crawled over. "We can bypass it," he said. "4 positions down. That's already more than—" "No, sir." McNulty was wrapping the burlap around his 6th bomb. "They'll regroup. Use it as a rally point. We take them all now or we don't take them at all." Thompson started to argue, then stopped. The cook was right. Tactically, strategically, it was the only choice that made sense. This time, 20 men provided covering fire. It still wasn't enough. McNulty made it 15 yards before machine gun fire forced him to ground. He crawled the remaining distance on his belly, dragging the flower bomb behind him, feeling bullets kick up frozen earth inches from his face. At 28 yards, he rose to one knee and threw. The bomb arced perfectly, dropped through the ventilation port without touching the sides. McNulty was still crawling back when Position 5 detonated. The explosion was different, sharper, louder. Later, they would discover the pillbox had been storing extra ammunition. The flower explosion had ignited the munitions. The entire structure collapsed inward, burying everything inside under tons of concrete and earth. 9:04 a.m. Position 6. By now the remaining German positions understood the threat. They'd watched 5 pillboxes explode from the inside in 30 minutes. They were firing at anything that moved, anything that looked like it might be carrying something. But they couldn't see the rear vents. That was the design flaw McNulty had identified. The ventilation had to face away from the enemy, had to be protected from direct fire. The Germans had built their own blind spot. Position 6 fell at 9:06 a.m. 9:08 a.m. Position 7. McNulty was running on fumes. His right shoulder was screaming. His hands were raw, bleeding where the rough burlap had torn the skin. He'd been crawling, running, throwing, crawling again for 34 minutes straight in sub-freezing temperatures. Private Danny Cole, 19 years old and terrified, volunteered to carry the 7th bomb forward. McNulty shook his head. "My throw," he said. "I know the weight, the wind, how the wet burlap handles." He made the approach, made the throw. The bomb missed the vent by 3 inches, struck the concrete wall, bounced back. For a terrible moment, McNulty thought it would land in the snow and fail to detonate. But the modified smoke grenade was still taped to the outside. It ignited at 9:10 a.m., exactly as designed, creating enough spark and flame to ignite the flour that had spilled from the torn canvas during impact. The explosion was external, less devastating than the others. But it was enough. The blast blew out the firing ports, filled the interior with flame and superheated air. No one inside could have survived. 9:13 a.m. Position 8. The last pillbox. The Germans inside could see what was coming. They opened fire immediately, full automatic, burning through ammunition in sustained bursts. They didn't care about conservation anymore. They just wanted to kill whatever was coming for them. McNulty took a deep breath. His last flower bomb sat at his feet. His mother's flower, soaked in Belgian stream water, wrapped in burlap that had probably started its life as a coffee sack. The entire contraption had cost the army roughly $2.37 to produce. It had killed over 100 German soldiers in 20 minutes. This final approach was the worst. The Germans knew exactly where he was, had adjusted their fire to cover every possible angle. McNulty crawled through a storm of bullets, feeling them impact the frozen ground around him, hearing them snap through the air above his head. At 35 yards, he couldn't get any closer. The fire was too intense. He rose to his knees, exposed, vulnerable. A bullet struck his left shoulder. The impact spun him halfway around. His vision grayed at the edges. McNulty completed the spin, used the momentum, threw the bomb with his right arm while his left hung useless at his side. The throw was perfect. The bomb sailed in a high arc, dropped into the ventilation port, disappeared. Sergeant Hayes and Private Cole reached McNulty at 9:14 a.m., dragged him back toward cover. He was conscious but bleeding, his shirt soaked red. Position 8 exploded at 9:15 a.m. 8 German positions destroyed. 20 minutes and 32 seconds from first detonation to last. Not a single American casualty beyond McNulty's shoulder wound. Captain Thompson knelt beside McNulty as the medic worked on his shoulder. The captain's hands were shaking. He stared at the burning ruins of 8 concrete fortifications, at the impossible thing his cook had just accomplished. "How did you know?" Thompson asked. "How did you know it would work?" McNulty's face was gray with pain and blood loss, but his eyes were clear. "My mother told me," he said. "Flour is a fuel. Respect it. Control it, or it controls you." Then he passed out. What McNulty didn't know, what no one on the American side knew for 3 weeks, was the psychological impact his flour bombs had on German defensive doctrine. On December 19, 1944, Wehrmacht engineers examined the ruins of the 8 pillboxes near Krinkelt. What they found terrified them. The explosions had come from inside. The concrete showed signs of massive internal pressure, bulging, cracking, fracturing from within. But there was no evidence of shaped charges, no residue from conventional explosives. Just white powder, everywhere, coating the walls, the floor, the bodies. German intelligence reports from late December 1944, captured after the war, revealed genuine confusion. One report, dated December 23, describes a new American explosive compound of unknown composition that could penetrate fortifications through molecular infiltration. Another report speculated about aerosol chemical weapons that violated the Geneva Conventions. No one in German high command considered flour. It was too absurd, too simple. It violated every principle of military engineering and weapons development. But the psychological effect was immediate and devastating. German soldiers manning pillboxes across the Ardennes began to panic. They couldn't trust their fortifications anymore. The strongest defensive positions on the Western Front had been destroyed by something they couldn't see, couldn't defend against, couldn't understand. A diary entry from Oberleutnant Friedrich Weber, captured January 3, 1945, reads, "The Americans have found a way to make our concrete coffins into crematoriums. We heard about Krinkelt. 8 positions gone in 20 minutes. No survivors. We blocked our ventilation ports today. Now we choose between suffocation and incineration." That final sentence captured the impossible dilemma. Block the vents, you suffocate. Leave them open, you risk whatever new horror the Americans had developed. On the American side, McNulty's innovation spread rapidly through informal channels. By December 28, at least 6 other units had experimented with flour-based improvised explosives. The results were mixed. Not every cook understood the precise chemistry involved. Not everyone had McNulty's throwing accuracy, but enough succeeded to prove the concept. A memorandum from 1st Army Headquarters, dated January 7, 1945, officially recommended against the use of flour as an explosive. The reasoning was pragmatic. Flour was desperately needed for food, supply chains couldn't prioritize it as a weapon, and the tactical benefits didn't justify the logistical complications. But the psychological damage to German defensive confidence was already done. Between December 18, 1944, and January 15, 1945, German forces abandoned or only partially manned 73 fortified positions across Belgium and Luxembourg. Not because they were physically compromised, but because the soldiers inside no longer trusted the concrete walls to protect them. The strategic impact was measurable. Allied forces advancing through the region encountered significantly less resistance from fortified positions than tactical models had predicted. Casualty rates for attacks on German pillboxes dropped by 22% between December 1944 and February 1945. Was this entirely due to McNulty's flour bombs? No. The collapse of German supply lines, declining morale, and overwhelming Allied numerical superiority all played larger roles. But military historians have documented a definite shift in German defensive psychology that correlates directly with the Krinkelt incident. The Germans had spent years building concrete fortresses. McNulty had shown that the strongest fortress could be turned into a weapon against its occupants. The fear that generated was worth more than the tactical victory. Modern flour mill safety regulations, ironically, owe more to World War II experimentation than to industrial accidents. Military engineers on both sides, studying the Krinkelt incident and similar dust explosions, developed comprehensive understanding of particulate combustion. Those findings filtered into civilian industry after the war, leading to the strict dust control measures used in grain processing facilities today. McNulty had weaponized a bakery accident. His mother would have understood perfectly. Private First Class James McNulty spent 3 weeks in a field hospital recovering from his shoulder wound. The bullet had shattered his collarbone, requiring surgery and 3 separate operations to set properly. He would never regain full range of motion in his left arm. He returned to duty February 12, 1945. Not to a kitchen unit. The Army, in its infinite wisdom, had decided McNulty was too valuable as an improvised weapons specialist. He spent the remaining months of the war teaching other units about dust explosions, particulate combustion, and creative applications of household materials. He never threw another flour bomb. The shoulder wouldn't allow it. Captain Robert Thompson recommended McNulty for the Distinguished Service Cross. The recommendation was downgraded to a Bronze Star with Valor device. The official citation praised his extraordinary courage under fire, but made no mention of flour. The Army apparently felt that acknowledging a cook had destroyed 8 German positions with baking ingredients might undermine confidence in conventional weapons development. McNulty received the medal in a brief ceremony on March 3, 1945. He thanked the commanding officer, saluted properly despite his damaged shoulder, and returned to teaching demolition safety to engineers who had spent 4 years at West Point. The physical toll was obvious. The psychological toll was harder to measure. McNulty had killed over 100 men in 20 minutes using a weapon so unconventional that most of them probably died without understanding what had happened. That knowledge lived with him. In a letter to his mother dated February 28, 1945, he wrote, "You were right about flour. It demands respect. I respected it. But I also used it to kill people who were somebody else's sons. I'm not sure how to feel about that." Anna McNulty's response, if she sent one, hasn't survived. The war ended May 8, 1945. McNulty shipped home in June. He returned to Butte, Montana, on June 23, walked into his mother's bakery at 7:15 a.m., and put on an apron without saying a word. For 43 years, James McNulty ran that bakery. He married in 1947, had 3 children, became a city council member, coached Little League. He was, by all accounts, a quiet man who rarely spoke about the war. His children remember him being extraordinarily careful about flour dust. He installed industrial ventilation systems decades before regulations required them. He trained every employee on the dangers of grain dust accumulation. He inspected the ovens personally every morning. The innovation's legacy in modern warfare is subtle but significant. Thermobaric weapons, explosives that disperse fuel before ignition, creating massive pressure waves, operate on principles McNulty demonstrated in Belgium. The Russians developed them. The Americans developed them. Everyone who studies explosive chemistry eventually encounters the basic physics of dust combustion. But McNulty didn't invent those weapons. He just understood that flour, under the right conditions, wasn't food. It was potential energy waiting for oxygen and heat. He died April 7, 1988, at age 67. Heart attack. Quick and relatively painless. His funeral was well attended. 300 people from Butte and the surrounding communities. The American Legion provided an honor guard. His Bronze Star was buried with him. His children never knew the full story of what he'd done in Belgium. He'd told them he was a cook who got lucky once. The archives tell a different story. Here's what matters about James McNulty's story. Not that he was a cook who became a soldier. Not that he invented an improvised weapon. Not even that he saved 47 men by destroying 8 German positions in 20 minutes. What matters is that he saw a problem everyone else thought was unsolvable, and he solved it using knowledge gained from his mother's bakery. The expertise that made him overlookable, that kept him out of combat units, that made officers dismiss his ideas as ridiculous. That same expertise saved lives when conventional military wisdom had nothing to offer. The generals had artillery. The engineers had demolitions. The infantry had courage and rifles. McNulty had flour and an understanding of chemistry that no military manual contained. History tends to remember the obvious things. The big battles. The famous generals. The technological breakthroughs that came from laboratories and think tanks. We build monuments to planned innovation, to intentional genius. But McNulty's story represents something different. It represents the value of unexpected knowledge, the power of practical experience, the way crisis forces us to see familiar things in revolutionary ways. Every German engineer who designed those pillboxes understood concrete, steel, ballistics, structural integrity. They had PhDs and decades of experience. They built fortifications that could withstand artillery bombardment, that could hold out for days against sustained assault. But none of them had worked in a bakery. McNulty saw what they couldn't see, that their greatest strength was also their greatest vulnerability. That the ventilation system designed to keep soldiers alive could be turned into a delivery mechanism for destruction. That the enclosed space meant to protect could be transformed into a combustion chamber. He did all this while bleeding, while under fire, while carrying an innovation so absurd that his own commanding officer called it the stupidest thing he'd ever heard. There's a small plaque in the Butte Silver Bow County Courthouse. It mentions James McNulty's service in World War II. Bronze Star recipient. City Council member. Local baker. The plaque doesn't mention flour bombs. It doesn't describe what happened December 18, 1944, in a frozen Belgian forest. But the absence of recognition doesn't diminish the achievement. McNulty didn't need monuments. He'd gone home. He'd survived. He'd used his knowledge to save lives instead of just taking them. That was enough. 47 men walked away from Crinkle because a cook understood that flour, given oxygen and heat, becomes something else entirely. 8 German positions burned because someone who wasn't supposed to be in combat knew more about combustion than the engineers who built fortifications. Sometimes the solution to an impossible problem comes from the person nobody expected. Sometimes the most devastating weapon is one that costs $2.37. Sometimes the difference between victory and defeat is understanding that the things we take for granted, bread flour, burlap sacks, smoke grenades, can be recombined into something revolutionary. McNulty carried that knowledge forward. He taught his children to respect flour, to understand its power. He installed ventilation systems in his bakery not because regulations required it, but because he'd seen what happens when dust finds flame. He lived with a memory of 20 minutes that shouldn't have worked but did. He carried the weight of 100 German soldiers who died in concrete boxes, burned by bread flour and heat. He never spoke about it publicly. But every morning, when he opened those industrial ovens, he remembered. The dead don't care about monuments. The living don't always need recognition. But the story matters. The innovation matters. The moment when an impossible situation met an impossible solution and 47 men survived because someone understood chemistry better than he understood fear. That's the legacy. Not glory. Not fame. Just the quiet understanding that sometimes the most powerful weapon is knowledge, and sometimes the most unlikely person carries exactly what's needed. James McNulty died at 67. His mother's bakery closed in 1992. The pillboxes near Crinkelt are gone now, reclaimed by forest and time. But the principle remains. Flour is a fuel. Respect it. Control it. Or it controls you. Anna McNulty was right. Her son proved it on December 18, 1944, in 20 minutes of improvised genius that saved 47 lives and broke German defensive doctrine across Belgium. He was just a cook. That's what everyone thought. That's what saved them all.